Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the super complete review of the Samsung Galaxy A15. You've probably noticed already, but this is an abnormally large review, and that's because we're going to cover everything about this phone, every component, every feature. If you have a specific question about this phone, it is most likely going to get answered during the video. In the timeline down below, you will find a bunch of timestamps just in case you want to skip forward to a specific part of the video you're more interested in. Maybe you don't care about the cameras, you only care about the battery or performance. Well, you can only take a look at that specific part of the video if that's what you want. And of course, as always, I left Amazon links for the A15 in the description with the best price just in case at the end of the video you want to buy it or take a look. Before we get into the specific components on the phone, I wanted to get into the different versions of the A15 you can find, because this is a rather limited aspect with only one storage option of 128 gigs and only one RAM option of 4 gigabytes. That being said though, we have 3 different colors, blue, black, and yellow, and we have a 4G and 5G version, so those of you who don't want super fast internet can save a little bit of money. That being said though, it would have been absolutely awesome to get a 6 gigabytes of RAM option on the phone, because although 4 gigabytes is fine for now, I believe in 2, 3, 4 years, that's going to get absolutely outdated. And although most of you will have upgraded from this phone in that time, there's also some of you who want to keep it for a little longer, and having only 4 gigabytes of RAM is going to be an issue in the future. Oh, and before I forget, even though there's only a 128 gigabyte version of the phone, we can expand that storage up to a terabyte with a micro SD card. Now it's time to talk about the exterior of the phone, the exterior design. As you can see, we have a very simplistic plastic back. In this case, even though it looks like dark blue, this is the black color. There's also a blue and a yellow option available. And well, like it's been the case for the past couple years with pretty much every Samsung phone, we have the classic 3 camera layout with no camera bump, with no extra design features. It's just the 3 cameras stacked up on each other and the flash to the side. I have to say though, the design looks very, very good when you just first get the phone, when you take it out of the box, but it's very easy to get dirty with fingerprints and just dirt, and when it's dirty it doesn't look good. So I actually would recommend for you to put a case with the phone at all times, because it can look very good and it can look very bad depending on how dirty it is. As you can see at the bottom of the phone, we have a headphone jack, a little tiny microphone, the USB-C port, which is actually USB-C 2.0, not 3.0, so we're not going to be able to connect it to displays or do fancy things with it. And we have a speaker, only one speaker on this phone, so audio, you're going to see it later, is not incredibly fantastic. To the side, we have a power button that also acts as a fingerprint scanner. Let me show you real quick. There we go. And we have a relatively tiny volume rocker. You have volume down, volume up. At the top of the phone, we have only one lonely microphone. There's nothing else. And then to the side, as you can see, there's also nothing at all. Well, there's one micro SD card plus SIM card tray. Oh, and by the way, something that I forgot to say is that the power button to the side is also a quick access to the camera. As you can see, if you double tap it, it's going to send you directly to the camera so you can take a quick photo. When it comes to the thickness, this phone is 8.4 millimeters, a little bit thinner than I was expecting, and the weight is 200 pounds to the dot, which is actually a little bit heavier than I was expecting. Take into account that the S24 Ultra, a very heavy and big phone, is 230 grams. So yeah, these two phones are very similar in heft. It is 16 centimeters tall, 7.6 centimeters wide. You have the conversions right here if you measure things in inches, and it has a 6.5 inch display, so it's a relatively big phone. It doesn't have wireless charging, so we're only going to be able to charge it through the USB-C port, and it doesn't have any water or dust protection, so be very careful with taking it to a pool or to the sea, because if you drown it in water, maybe it doesn't break, but maybe it does. There's no guarantees. When it comes to the feeling in your hand, I would say it doesn't feel super ergonomic because of the flat sides, but it also doesn't feel bad. It's kind of like the same situation we have with the iPhone 15s. It's not completely flat. It's a little bit curved on the sides. So even though it's not as ergonomic as a curved side phone, it is also not terrible. It feels decent, and the weight balance is very good. It's the same weight balance you would expect from a high-end phone. It doesn't feel like the camera part of the phone is more heavy, which is unfortunately the case with a bunch of phones. It is very well balanced, so it's very comfortable to hold. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about the display on the A15. I'm going to give you a spec card here so you can see all the different specs. It has an AMOLED display, which as many of you know is a normal OLED display made by Samsung with their special unique technology. This is not an IPS panel. It has amazing blacks, amazing whites, great colors, punchy images, and Samsung of course is very good at calibrating their displays. It also has a 90 Hz refresh rate. We can of course activate it in the settings. The standard would be 60 Hz, high would be 90 Hz, which I always recommend. It's a lot smoother, it makes the phone experience be way better. When you're scrolling or navigating the phone, 90 Hz is going to feel a lot more premium, a lot more responsive than 60 Hz. So if you don't really want the best battery possible at all costs, I would recommend you turn it on. And well, it also has a 6.5-inch panel, which is rather big, as you can see comparing it to the Galaxy S24 Ultra, which is 6.7 inches. It's on the bigger side of things, which I guess is what most people want nowadays. That's why Samsung's making most of their phones relatively big. But just so you know, if you have small hands or you want slightly more compact phone, maybe this is not the one for you because it is pretty big. It is a pretty chunky phone. The only bad thing I can say about the display on this phone is that it only, quote unquote, only has an 84.3% display to body ratio, meaning the display takes only, which is actually pretty good, 83% of the front panel. Then it has 800 nits of brightness, which, trust me, is more than enough for everybody in any kind of scenario. We've been seeing crazy nits on phones lately, 2000 on the iPhone, 2600 on the S24 Ultra, and I guess that makes people think 800 or 700 or 600 is not enough, but guys, those super crazy nits of brightness are only available on super special lighting conditions for a couple minutes. This phone is actually only 1200 nits of brightness, so the difference is not that big. And as I said, I've tried it, I've tested it indoors and outdoors, facing the sun, and 800 nits of brightness is more than enough in most situations. And well, last but not least, we have a full HD plus display, which means it's a little bit over 1080p. It's, to be more specific, 1080 by 2340 with a pixel density of 396, almost 400, which, as I say in all of my videos, is way over what you can differentiate with the naked eye. I mean, this phone has, for example, 500 PPI, this one has 400 PPI, and looking at them side by side, I cannot notice any differences in pixel density and sharpness, and that's because my eyes are not capable of looking at the individual pixels at this point. So you could add 23 trillion pixels to each phone, we would not be able to notice any differences. Of course, when it comes to the panel quality, this is one of the strongest points on the A15. As many of you know, Samsung makes every panel in every one of their phones. So they always have a better way to implement the technologies, calibrate the panels, and make their displays a little bit better than the competition in most cases. I cannot really show you how good it is through the video because I'm recording the phone and then uploading that footage to YouTube. So there's a lot of quality loss in the process. But as you saw earlier, I compared it to the S24 Ultra, and the difference is very small. There's incredible viewing angles, there's a lot of sharpness, colors are amazing. In fact, that's I think one of the most surprising things about the A15 is that it doesn't have those shiny, super vibrant colors we traditionally saw in Samsung Galaxy phones. It has more natural colors that are closer to what we can see in real life. And I know a lot of people don't like this. They want the vibrant colors, which is fine. You can activate those more vibrant colors in the settings if you want to, but having the option to get more realistic colors on the phone like we do get on the iPhone, I think is amazing. For the first time ever in my life, I'm using a $150 phone, a basic phone, and I don't miss the display quality of my flagship alternatives. I have the S24 Ultra, I have the 15 Pro, and I don't really miss those displays. I mean, sure, they're faster phones, they have better cameras, but when it comes to display quality, this is very close to what we can get on those phones, which is insane. Of course, we also have to talk about the internal components. In this case, we have a MediaTek Helio G99 6nm octa-core processor, a Mali G57 MC2 graphics card, and as I said earlier, we have 4GB of RAM. There's no other alternatives. There's no 6GB version, and of course it is not expandable. My experience with the phone, considering it is a, as I said earlier, basic device with a basic price, has been pretty good. Apps open at a decent speed and they work just fine. I mean, of course, there's some little hiccups here and there, and it is not going to be as smooth of an experience as you would find with more premium phones, but like for normal people trying to get like a normal experience with normal apps, this is more than enough. I've actually played some 3D games and some like casual phone games, and they've all worked incredibly well. I'm going to do like a pro gaming test later for those of you who want to see how good in a more specific way gaming is on this phone, but for casual games like this, like Subway Surfers, it is going to be just fine, more than enough. In fact, I'm going to show you a speed test as opposed to the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, the top tier phone in the lineup, so you can see how fast the phone is opening a series of apps, as opposed to the reference in 2024, the fastest phone you can buy from Samsung, which as I said is the S24 Ultra. Let's begin. Let's open the camera app. 3, 2, 1... Okay, as you can see, it is of course faster on the S24, but it was not that different. Let's see how much it takes to take a photo. Okay, oh, actually it was a little faster on the A15, right? Very interesting. Let's see how much they both take to open the weather app. Okay, that was dramatically faster on the S24 Ultra, but this was not that bad. It was maybe like 0.3 seconds slower. Let's do the settings app. Okay, it's everything on the S24 Ultra opens immediately. It takes a little while on the A15, but it's way better than I was expecting. Let's do the YouTube app. 3, 2, 1. Okay, of course, yes, YouTube is way faster on the S24. I guess as apps get a little bit more complex, we're going to start seeing a bigger difference in speed. Let's do the Amazon app. 3, 2, 1. Of course, S24 is faster. Okay, I mean, it's a very manageable difference. I would not be devastated to have to use a phone that's 0.5 seconds slower. Let's do the Amazon app. 3, 2, 1. Okay, of course, faster, but as I said, this one's not that bad. It's surprisingly fast. Let's do the Play Store. God damn, it's immediate on the S24, but this one took like, as I said, god damn, I'm impressed. Instagram, let's do Instagram. God, they're so close. This is insane. This one's $1,500 and this one's only $150. Okay, let's try Call of Duty. This is a far more complex program. It is a 3D video game, so we should see a bigger difference between the S24 Ultra and the A15. It's going to take like a couple seconds on the S24. As you can see, there we go. It's already loaded up. And on the A15, well, it's taking a little bit more time. Woo, okay, not that bad. 3, 4, 5 more seconds. It's not that bad. Let's see Subway Surfers, another game. It's very fast on the S24 Ultra, and it's taking a little bit more time on the. But it's not unbearable. Like I could definitely live with the A15 taking a couple more seconds, right? Like let's see actually how they work inside of the game, not just loading it up. Okay, feels a little bit more snappy on the S24. I feel like this one has, I can't play 2 games at the same time. This one is a little bit more sluggish, and this one's very immediate. I think it's because it has a higher sample refresh rate or whatever it's called. Okay, let's do a third video game, Asphalt 9. It's faster on the S24, of course. Let's see how much faster it is. Okay, one done. And well, I'm very, very surprised. I mean, of course, S24 Ultra is way faster, but it is not I thought this was going to be like 10 times slower because it's 10 times less expensive, but it's not. On most day-to-day apps, it's actually pretty close, almost identical. Sure, this has that immediacy, that snappiness of a new What? Am I crazy, or are they both loaded at the same time? Wow. Okay, let's do the last app. This is a browser app opening test. Okay, took a little bit more on the A15. Let's open Amazon.com. Wow. Okay, this one immediate, but this one is almost immediate. I am incredibly surprised with the performance of the A15. And well, now it's time to do the graphical test. We're going to play two games, Call of Duty Mobile and Genshing Impact, in all of their graphical settings to see how far this phone can go in terms of graphical capability until it starts slowing down and giving us bad performance. As you can see in Call of Duty Mobile, there's not much we can do in the settings. There's only two options, low graphical quality and medium graphical quality, and then we can do low, medium, or high frame rate. Of course, we're going to set it to the maximum because we want this to be as smooth as possible. And we're playing, as you can see, I am playing with a controller right now, so you don't see my fingers on the way. And well, the low graphical preset, you can definitely tell is not as good looking as maybe the medium or high or ultra high on other phones, because even though we only have low and medium on this phone, doesn't mean there's no high-end settings, ultra settings. It's just that this phone doesn't have those options enabled because I guess the experience would not be ideal, so they turned it off by default. When it comes to the experience and fluidity, it is as good as it can get. I cannot give you a specific frame rate number because it's not an option on the game or any game actually. But later on, I'll jump to touch control so I can give you a more specific number of FPS based on my input. It's a little bit of a bummer that they didn't let me choose resolution. I think this is well, the basic resolution of the phone. It doesn't go any lower, it doesn't go any higher, so there's nothing you can do about that. The only option you have to make things look a little bit good when it comes to resolution is to enable or disable anti-aliasing on the settings. In my case, I have it enabled, but basing off my experience with it off, it doesn't really make that big of a difference. I didn't tell you earlier, but later on I'm going to do a temperature check after 10 minutes of gameplay to see how, not only how good it performs, of course, but how warm it gets during that performance. Because if it gets too hot, that means that during a long gaming session, it would probably get worse. It would decrease the level of fluidity of the gameplay because the phone would throttle based on that temperature. Okay, let's jump to touch controls to see how smooth the game. Oh, okay, so it's very, very smooth. This is definitely taking advantage of the 90 Hz refresh rate. I was not able to see it with the controller because, as many of you know, controllers tend to be less sensitive or give you less feedback when it comes to the fluidity of the game. That's why you can definitely get by with playing a 30 FPS game with a controller, but you cannot get by with playing a 30 FPS game with hand controls or mouse and keyboard. But yeah, it definitely feels very smooth. And now by touching the phone after 15 minutes of gameplay, I can tell you that it is not warm at all. The phone is completely cool, or at least the part that I'm touching. The only bad thing we can say about this low graphical preset, as I said, is that it feels a little bit woo. Okay, definitely found a bot here. You can definitely tell when it's a bot or a real player. Real players are pretty good on this game, and then bots are just, oh, okay, another bot. There we go. The graphical settings are low, and it doesn't feel like a modern game. It definitely feels pretty basic, but resolution is pretty okay. I'm pretty sure it's native resolution, 1080 by 2320, something like that. All right, let's do a temperature check. Wow, it's pretty cool. 26 degrees Celsius. I'm going to give you a Fahrenheit conversion right here for those of you who don't understand what this means. It's very cool. It's a very like basic, the idle temperature you would find on the phone. It's basically not any warmer than you would find it if it was turned off. All right, now let's try the medium graphical preset, which is as high as we can get with the A15. Of course, we still have high frame rate selected. And as we had before, we have anti-aliasing on and realistic scope off, which I don't know if this affects the graphics. I don't think so. All right, we're playing with medium graphics, and it feels as smooth as it did with low graphics. Have I noticed a little hiccup right there? I don't know. When it comes to the overall performance, it is as smooth as it was before, but maybe there are some little hiccups. I mean, at the end of the day, we have maxed out the, whoa. What are you doing here, my friend? I'm super bad with a controller on this game. We have maxed out this game when it comes to the graphical settings. So if you see a little hiccup, it would not be surprising. I mean, this is as high as the phone gives us the option to go. So of course, maybe there are some little issues. All right, let's do it. Touch controls. Let's see. Ooh, okay, very smooth too. So I don't really notice that big of a difference when it comes to the graphical settings. You probably don't either. It looks pretty much identical as it did with a low graphical preset. It is also the case when it comes to the fluidity of the game. I don't notice any hiccups. I notice a very smooth experience. It is also taking advantage of 90 Hz. This is definitely above 60. So yeah, whatever Okay, that was a little hiccup over there. You saw it. But overall, the experience when those hiccups don't happen, which for now it's only happened once in the entire match, the experience is pretty good. I mean, I would actually play in low settings, even though this is better technically because I don't notice the difference between low and medium when it comes to the graphical fidelity. They both feel as smooth, they both feel good, but with low settings, you would guarantee that you're not going to get any hiccups. I think it might actually be some kind of marketing thing from Samsung or from Call of Duty because I didn't really notice any difference in any way between low and medium. All right, let's measure the temperature with medium settings. As you can see, it's exactly the same. No difference at all. Medium and low are the same, so I would just do low settings because it's probably going to save more battery. It's going to be a little smoother. You're going to get rid of the hiccups. 27.7 degrees Celsius. Okay, now it's time to move on to a little bit more demanding game. This is Genshing Impact. We're going to start with the lowest settings possible, as you can see. And of course, I'm not going to touch anything. I'm going to set it to default. The only thing is the FPS. I want to set them to 60 so it's a smooth experience. And as you can see, it says it's overclocked at the bare minimum graphical preset with 60 FPS. Let's see how it performs. Okay, it's pretty smooth. Okay, it's fine. Of course, the graphics are kind of shitty at lowest settings. As you can see, there's not much textures. There's a lot of popping, but it's fine. It works fine. It's relatively smooth. I don't feel any hiccups. It is a nice experience overall. So if you have this phone, you want to play Genshing Impact, you absolutely can. It's just that you're not going to be able to play it at higher settings with a good experience because this is overclocked right now and it's giving me some lightweight jitter and lightweight stuttering. I can only assume that as soon as I turn this to medium or high, it's going to become a hot mess. Let's deal with... Oh, what are you doing, little boy? Anyways, let's do the first temperature check. This is with the lowest settings possible. All right, it's a little warmer than with Call of Duty, but it's still manageable. 31 degrees Celsius is perfectly fine. Me touching it right here, I don't notice any heat, any warmth. Okay, let's switch things up a little bit. Let's do low settings instead of lowest. As you can see, it's already almost overclocked. And it's back to 30 FPS. Let's put it in 60 FPS. Overclocked. There we go. And it's okay. It still feels good. I'm assuming this is going to give me more jittering, more choppiness. But if you're not doing anything specific, it feels relatively smooth. I would actually not use this setting because it looks identical to lowest in terms of the graphical fidelity. So it doesn't make any sense to lose experience or fluidity if you're not going to get any graphical gains. Let's try to fight these enemies a little bit, even though they're actually a little bit overkill for me. I'm level, I think, 2, and they're level, what? Oh, they're level 1. They're easy, right? Are they level 1 or level 11? I can't read from this distance. I'm sorry, I have a camera in front of me. Anyways, as you saw, this is borderline unplayable because if you're not doing anything specific, it's fine. But as soon as you start fighting enemies, it's going to become a choppy mess. So I would only recommend you play this at lowest. Let's check the temperature. And okay, it's getting warmer. It's getting warmer. 30. We're doing 30. Okay, it's getting warmer. 36. Now let's do... This is going to become a mess very fast. But let's do medium graphics. It's already overclocked at 30 FPS. But let's put it at 60. Let's just not move. Let's just leave it as is. And move the camera. Okay, it's choppy. It's a little choppy moving the camera, so I assume as I start walking or doing stuff... Okay, it's becoming very choppy very fast. Okay, this is definitely not playing at 60 FPS. It's like it's trying to do 60 FPS, and sometimes it gets there, but most of the time I would say it's probably playing at 20-something FPS. 27, 28 FPS. It's very choppy. God damn, this is unplayable. The phone's getting warmer, by the way. I'm starting to notice a little heat in my left hand. Not in this one. I guess it's because the battery is in this side, so it's getting, of course, warmer than the rest of the phone. But yeah, experience. I would not recommend you play the phone like this. As you can see, when I move the camera around, it rapidly becomes way too messy. Okay, let's do a temperature check. And so, okay, 38. We're doing 38, but it's still fine. It's still like the phone's going to be fine. It's not going to break any internal components. 39 degrees is like, yeah, warm temperature. The phone's working. Now let's do high settings. This is going to become a big mass and do 60 and sexy FPS. Let's do it. Okay. Oh my God, not even moving. I would not be surprised if the phone hits 41, 42 Celsius at the end of the high settings portion of the test. But yeah, I would not even, I'm not even confident encountering enemies like this because, yeah, as I move the camera, the phone, you know, just loses its capability to stay stable. And it probably is dropping from 60 to 3, back to 20, back to 60, back to 1 FPS. I would not play in high settings. I would not play in medium settings. This is just for you to see how bad it can get, I guess, with higher settings. Let's do the temperature check. 95. Can we do 40? Can we do 40? Don't embarrass me in front of the people. There we go, 40. Let's do highest graphical settings possible. Everything is set to high. And let's do 60 and sexy again. Very choppy menus. Very choppy everything. Oh my God, it's okay. I guess it's not as bad as I thought it would be because, I mean, it's horrible, but it's not worse than we were getting at high settings. So if it's all about graphics for you, you don't care about a choppy experience, just set it to maximum. It's going to warm up the phone a lot. It's going to burn your fingers after a couple hours, a couple minutes. But, well, I guess you can play it like this and enjoy the visuals. I would not do this. I would not use it like this. I would just do lowest settings possible, 45 FPS, and just try to make it be a little stable because, you know, it's always better to play in a smooth way than to look at all the beautiful scenery but not be able to, like, actually do anything because it's super choppy and unreliable. It's not super warm. Like, I mean, sure, it is warm, but like iPhones get warmer. Galaxy S24 Ultra, when you just throw everything at it, it gets warmer. I guess it's because it's a like entry level processor, so it's not capable of getting to those temperatures. It's not capable of producing that much heat, so it also doesn't get as warm as those higher end processors. Then when it comes to the battery life, we have a 5,000 milliamp hour non-removable battery, meaning we only are able to change it if we go to the repair shop and they take the back panel off and they change the battery with special tools and everything, which is kind of a shame. I wish that they would have included a removable battery. That would have been amazing. But on the other hand, as I said, it is 5,000 milliamp hours, which for a phone like this is absolutely insane. We're going to get incredible battery life. I've actually been testing it on its own and against some other crazy phones like this. And guys, surprisingly, even though this one's $150 and this one's $1,500, they both have about the same battery life. This is a very good phone if what you care about is using it for all day long, as much as you want, without having to touch a charger. What I didn't really like about it was that it doesn't include wireless charging. You can only charge it using the USB-C port, which is, by the way, USB-C 2.0, so you can't connect it to any displays or do anything fancy with it. And it only charges up to 25 watts, which, sure, it's technically fast charging, but it's a little bit under what we can see in other offers, like the A15 or the higher end models that can charge up to 45 watts. And if you compare it to a Xiaomi phone, then it's even worse because those phones are getting crazy. 75 watts, 90 watts, 100 watts. Of course, this being an Android phone and having one UI, we have a bunch of options for the battery. As you can see, we have a power saving mode, which is the typical mode where the phone limits some of its capabilities so you can get more battery life out of the phone. We can actually tweak to what degree we want this power saving mode. As you can see, we have the option to limit the CPU speed up to 70%, which is going to make the phone last even longer at the expense of some performance. We can decrease the brightness by 10%, which again is going to give us more battery life at the expense of a little bit dimmer display. And we can even limit some apps in the home screen. If we're really desperate about battery life, we can turn this on and only allow certain apps to work. Everything else is not going to work. Then we have background usage limits, which is an amazing setting because it allows us to select certain apps we don't want to turn off or put to sleep if we're using them very often. So imagine you use Instagram all the time. You want to use that app all the time during the day and you don't want the phone to put it into sleep or to turn it off. You can actually tell the phone to never turn off, let me see if I can find it, never turn off Instagram. So it doesn't matter how many apps are working at the same time in the background, it's never going to put Instagram to sleep. There it is. We can turn it on added, and Instagram will always be ready to use. This is pretty cool. Then we have an option to protect the battery life. If we turn it on, of course, the phone is going to change the way it does things. It's going to charge a little bit slower, and it's going to therefore make the battery work less and be healthier and have a better temperature, so it's going to last longer in time. In 3-4 years, there's probably going to be a noticeable difference in battery life if you turn this option on or off during those 3 years. Then, of course, we have the typical graph that shows us when we've charged the phone, how much we've used it, what apps did we use the most, how much percentage of usage did those apps take. We have charging settings that allows us to enable or disable fast charging. Very interestingly, if we turn it off, we're never going to be able to fast charge the phone, even if we have a fast charger. And of course, we have the classic show battery percentage toggle that we can use to not show how much battery you have or show how much battery you have. I don't really know why anybody would turn this off. It's very useful, but it's there. And well, finally, it's time to put those battery life claims into practice. I ran a drain test on the A15 from 100% battery life to 50% battery life, doing both extensive GPU and CPU benchmarks and recording video using the selfie camera. My friends, results have not only been incredible because yes, the phone is very good in terms of battery life, but also they have been incredibly consistent. As you can see, I started at 2 p.m. with 100% battery life, of course, no apps in the background. Then I ran CPU and GPU benchmarks for an hour, and at 3 p.m. I had 92% battery life remaining. Then another hour of continuous selfie video, meaning I didn't stop the recording. It was like a complete hour of full recording, which is very draining on the phone. And at 4 p.m. I had 82% battery life remaining. Then another hour of GPU and CPU benchmarks, and surprise, surprise, at 5 p.m. I had 72% battery life remaining, meaning I'm basically losing 10% each hour consistently. From 5 to 6, I went back to video recording using the selfie camera, and at 6 p.m. I had 62% battery life remaining. Another 10% lost, regardless of what I do with the phone. And finally, from 6 to 7, I went back to the benchmarks. I ran CPU, GPU benchmarks, the same ones that I ran in the past segments. And at 7 p.m., after 5 hours of continuous use, I had 52% battery life remaining, which is funny because it's another 10% lost in that hour. And it's also funny because it's one of the best battery lives I've seen in a long time. It's actually a little bit better than the S24 Ultra, it's better than the new Redmi Note 13, and it's better than its predecessor, the Galaxy A14. And of course, we have to talk about all of the security options we have to protect the phone against bad people. First of all, we have lock screen options. We can of course use a PIN to protect the phone, which is what I'm currently using. We can use a password with letters, numbers, and emojis, so you can protect the phone with a lot more security. You can also use the classic Android pattern if you want. And then in combination with these methods, we also have facial security, facial biometrics, which I always recommend to turn off in these phones because we only have one camera at the top, so this is not very secure. It's easy to fake your face, so I always recommend you use the fingerprint scanner. In this case, as I said, it's located on the side of the phone. It's not on the screen like on the more expensive Samsung phones. But I have to say that it is very fast and it is also very reliable. It never fails on me. It always religiously turns on the phone. So yeah, I guess you can complain about the position of the sensor. Some people will like it to be at the back. Some other people like me would love for it to be in the front or in the display, and well, some other people like it to be on the side. But what really matters is the level of quality, the level of reliability of the button, and in this case, it's pretty good. Then of course, we have security and privacy options. We have this little page that shows everything when it comes to security and privacy. We have a lock screen, tick. We have account security, tick. We have lost device protection, tick. But what's really interesting here is the app security. If we turn this on, which actually doesn't come enabled by default, every time you enter an app or a game or anything on your phone, there's going to be a background scan looking for viruses or bad things that could be taking place in that app, which is going to give you a lot of peace of mind. Imagine you go to the browser and you want to get into a little bit of a sketchy site and you're not sure if they're going to start recording you using the front camera or, hack into your phone or something. Well, if you enable this security measure, every time you log into anything or turn anything on, it's going to run, as I said, a background scan looking for trouble. And if it finds that trouble, it's going to disable it automatically. And of course, we also have to talk about the safety and emergency settings. We have a bunch of things here. I'm very surprised because this is everything we can find on the top tier S24 Ultra. Samsung gave us all of the options, all of the toggles. We can do the basic things we've seen for a long time now, like emergency contacts. We can set one of our contacts to be the emergency contact. So if anything bad happens to us or the phone, there's going to be a permanent card in the front of the phone showing the information of that person so you can contact them. We have, of course, emergency SOS and some other cool options like earthquake alerts or silence notifications when driving. If you turn this on, you're not going to get any noises or distractions when you're driving. This is pretty helpful. Let me turn it on. And this one is by far the coolest. Unknown tracker alerts. If you enable this, which actually is enabled by default, every time there's someone tracking you or the phone detects some kind of AirTag-like device, it's going to tell you, hey, you're being followed, someone's tracking you. This is awesome. Okay, now let's talk about the audio. The first thing I want to do, as I always do, is to show you a recording made with the A15 using the microphones on the phone so you can see how good or how bad the quality of those microphones is. Okay, so this is a little recording with the Galaxy A15 using the microphones on the phone so you can see how good or how bad it sounds. You're going to be the judge of that. I believe it's pretty normal if you ask for my opinion, but yeah, that's it. I'm in an interior space, so of course audio quality is going to be better than normal. If you're outside, there's noises, there's cars, of course the sound isolation of this phone is going to do a better, worse job, but in an interior space with no other noises that could affect the audio quality, this is what you're gonna get. As I said earlier, that recording you just saw has been made with only two little microphones, the one at the bottom and the one at the top. Those are the only two microphones on this phone. They're very little, but also I would say rather powerful and good quality for that very tiny size. And well, as it's usually the case with most Samsung phones, we have sound and vibration settings for those of you who want to tweak the various aspects of audio in this phone. The first thing we see is the 3-option toggle of sound, vibrate, and mute. That, by the way, you can also toggle in the quick settings menu, just so you know. We have the option to temporarily mute the phone. We can set it for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, or custom. We also have a toggle for every single volume slider we want. So we can select the ringtone volume, we can select media volume, we can do notification volume. Of course, it's not activated because I'm on mute. And of course, also the general system sound. But my favorite feature on the sound settings is the sound quality and effects tab, because here is where we will find the equalizer, which is, as you know, the typical slider menu, so you can adjust the profile of the audio and the little toggles. If you want to listen to pop music, you can turn it on, and the audio levels are going to change so you have a better experience listening to pop. You can do classic music, jazz, rock, or even customize it so you can tweak all these little things on your own if you're an expert and you know what you're doing. In my case, I don't even know what any of these things are, so I'm just going to set it to normal. But if you are into audio tweaking so you can get a better experience, you can do that on the phone. Probably one of the craziest features I've seen is this adapt sound toggle. If you turn it on, it's going to adapt the sound to your age. You can say you're under 30 years old, between 30 to 60 years old, and over 60 years old. And depending on these things, the phone is going to set the different levels and tones that you saw earlier in the equalizer, so you have a better experience depending on your age. That's very interesting. By the way, something you should also know is that this phone supports pretty much every single high-end audio codec for all the wireless earbuds. Samsung buds, Xiaomi buds, Huawei buds, pretty much all of them, besides AirPods. If you have a pair of AirPods, I'm sorry to say that you're not going to be able to take full advantage out of those earbuds because they use a very special Apple codec that only works with iPhones. You know how Apple is. So yeah, if you have AirPods, well, pretty much any other Android phone and this A15 are not going to be the right option for you, but that's not something specific to this phone. It happens with every single Android phone. And well, as it's customary for these kinds of videos, I'm going to show you 30 seconds of a song, copyright free, so there's no issues, so you can see how good or bad the quality of the speakers is on the A15. Okay, now let's move on to talk about software, another very important piece of the A15. In this case, as I said earlier, we have Android 14 and we have One UI 6. I'm not going to get into too much detail with Android 14 because a lot of those features are actually overlapped by One UI 6, which is a custom layer made by Samsung for their phones. So that is what we're going to get into, the features that are new with One UI 6. For those of you who don't know, navigation around the system with a Samsung phone that uses One UI 6 is a little different than with naked Android. We have the typical rows of icons. We could of course have widgets, modify the size of those widgets. We can move icons wherever we want on the screen. This is not an iPhone, but the main difference, besides the look of the icons and everything, which is also a little different than with naked Android, is that if we want to access the entire app library, it is not organized in a scrolling sheet or whatever you want to call it. It's organized in pages like it would be on an iPhone or like you would see with the main page. It also affects the look of certain apps like the settings. This doesn't look like the settings with naked Android. It has different icons and a different font. And we also get, on top of the typical Google apps that are usually coming with pretty much every Android phone, a bunch of Samsung apps that are exclusive for Samsung phones and a bunch of Microsoft apps, because I guess there's a collaboration going with Samsung and Microsoft. But anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about the specific new features with One UI 6. The first one has to do with the search bar. If you type in a specific app like the weather, now you can access the quick toggles like you would be able to if you access the app on the homepage. We can also access those same quick toggles below the icon of the camera without having to long press in this new card that's below. So you can see we can take a selfie, we can record video, we can take a portrait. We also have the option now to automatically scan documents using the camera app without toggling the specific scene optimizer we had to activate before to scan a document, even though I'm having a little bit of an issue with this one and most ones with the A15. I'm not really sure why, but I can tell you I have an S24 and S24 Ultra and they do it automatically with any document. Another new feature now has to do with notifications. As you can see, now they are all individual cards as opposed to one large card divided by lines. It is closer to what we have on the iPhone, and personally, I much rather have this. It looks a lot more clean, a lot more organized. Another new feature is that now with photos, you can swipe up and it gives us a bunch of different AI features depending on the photo. In this case, it's a selfie taken with a selfie camera, so we only have one AI option, which is to turn it into a portrait photo. As you can see, if we tap in, it's going to automatically do its thing. It's AI magic. And there we go. It's turned it into a portrait photo. As you can see, we can adjust the level of blur we have on the image, which is actually pretty advanced. I was not expecting this feature to be available in the A15, which is a very low tier phone from Android. Coming back to notifications, we can also now sort them by time instead of just priority. So you can sort them by time and they will appear as they come in a more, I guess, organized way. If you rather have this organization method, you can have it now. Coming back to the photos, something that's very interesting is that if you apply any kind of edit to a photo, meaning you adjust the brightness, you adjust the exposure, or whatever you want, you can actually copy the edit and then go to a different photo, like this one right here, and paste the edit so you can automatically have the same edit in both photos. That's very handy because if you want to edit a bunch of photos that are have the same lighting conditions, you can edit all of them at once, copying and pasting the edit in all of them. Oh, and also if you apply multiple different edits into a photo, you modify exposure, you modify contrast, there we go, you modify highlights, you can actually go individually reverting those changes one by one, which surprisingly was not a thing before. You had to actually cancel the edit and go back to the initial photo. Now you can one by one take out all of those individual changes. You can also now change the position of the time in the lock screen, even make it a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, without having to choose between the basic default settings. You can actually pick one and then make it your own, making it a little bit bigger, changing the font between all of these different styles. It's very similar to what we can see on the iPhone. Actually, this reminds me of the lock screen modifications we can see on iOS 16 and 17. But well, it's pretty cool. So it's nice that we have it on Samsung phones too. And well, last but not least, they've actually modified some of the emojis you can see on the emoji tab. I can show you all the changes because most of them have not been changed, and the ones that have been changed slightly, so I can't really show you the individual changes one by one. We would be, talking for like a couple hours about each individual emoji and the way it's been individually changed. But yeah, they've been changed a little bit. They've been made more modern, I guess, more up to date. And finally, it's time to talk about one of the most important components on this phone, the cameras. As you can see, we have 3 cameras on the back. You saw it earlier in the design segment. We have a 50 megapixel f1.8 main sensor. We have a 5 megapixel f2.2 ultra-wide sensor. And we have a little tiny 2 megapixel macro lens. As you can see, the camera interface is very similar to the one we can see in pretty much every Samsung phone. We have the typical photo mode where you can take a normal photo or a group photo. That makes the frame a little bit wider. We have the typical filters at the top, so we can select between a bunch of different styles of photography for those of you who want to play around. We also have different aspect ratios, so we can do 3:4, 9:16. We can do 1:1, so it's a square, and we can do full. That utilizes the entirety of the display, so you can take a sort of like an ultra wide photo. Then we have the typical timer, so we can do 2 seconds, 5 seconds, or 10 seconds before the phone takes the photo. We also have the flash option, so we can turn it on or off depending on what we want. And of course, this being an Android phone, and especially a Samsung phone, we have a ton of camera settings to tweak pretty much everything there is to tweak on the phone. We have a scene optimizer that basically changes the colors and the contrast of photos to make them look better. We have the option to swipe the shutter button to either take a burst shot or create a GIF. We can also toggle high efficiency pictures, which are going to be less space demanding, but also a little bit less quality. We have auto HDR. We have grid lines, which I always recommend you turn on because it's going to help you take better photos. We also have location tags, so we can enable the camera while using the app to know where we are. So it adds that information to the photo, and much, much more. It takes portrait photos, both normal photos and selfie photos. So yeah, we can take selfie portrait photos, both on the one person and multiple person shot. And then, as you can see, we also have a fun tab where we can find a bunch of different, how do I call this, filters for different effects. This is kind of what you find on TikTok. This is a bunch of different modes of like cute little things you can add to your video to make it look special, original. You can do night mode, so if you're taking a photo at night, it's going to optimize it to take the most quality possible. And you have the macro photo capability. Let me take a macro photo real quick so you can see. It's basically like a very up close photo of an object. Oh, and well, for the pros, we also have a pro mode with pretty much every single toggle you could imagine. We can change the ISO, we can change the shutter speed, we can change the EV. I'm not sure what EV. Oh, I think the EEV is, I think it's exposure compensation. We can change the focus from auto to manual if you want to manually change the focus of the scene. What else we can do? Oh, white balance. We can change the white balance. This, of course, is not for most people. This is for the camera nerds out there that really care about taking the right photo with the right settings and are going to do a better job than the auto mode on the camera. But for pretty much everybody else, I don't recommend to use this unless you know what you're doing. Then when it comes to video, we have a pretty similar layout. We can change from the ultra-wide camera to the 1x camera to the 2x camera, which is, well, actually, it's not a 2x camera. It's a crop in the main sensor, in the 1x sensor. We have the same settings we had before. We can do filters. We can do, we can change the resolution from full HD 30 to HD 30. There's not a lot of options on this phone. We can change the aspect ratio. In this case, we don't have as much variety as we had with photos. We can do 9:16. We can do 1:1, so it's a square video, and we can change it to full, so it's like a ultra wide looking video. But then on the More tab, we have two things that I want to talk about specifically for video. One of them is slow motion. We can take 720p up to 120 FPS slow-mo video, which is a little bit underwhelming. I was expecting the camera to at least be able to do 1080p 120. I'm not really sure why Samsung decided to cap it so much to 1080 30 and only 720p 120, but it is what it is. And well, also something you should know is that if you go to More and you tab on the Pro settings, you can only take photos with the Pro settings. There's no video Pro mode. there's only a photo pro mode. So that's something that I was very discouraged by because I'm a pro videographer. I don't take photos, and to see that I can only access things like the ISO, the speed, the shutter speed, the autofocus, and the white balance on photos is, I don't know. I didn't really like it. As always, let's begin by talking about the main camera, which has been incredibly surprising both in terms of detail and dynamic range. I think Samsung has shifted their priorities when it comes to the cameras because for a couple of years, they used to do a lot of cameras with kind of mediocre quality, and I think now they're focusing on making less cameras with a lot more quality. So yeah, this definitely is the best camera on the phone, and this definitely follows that philosophy. It is a very, very good camera. I was also incredibly surprised by the level of background blur we get in a lot of these images. This is something we can only see in very high-end phones. This sort of like DSLR level cinematography style photos. It is incredible that we can get these kinds of results on a $150 phone. In fact, as I said earlier, it has such high resolution and such good quality that Samsung has been able to make sort of like a little cutout on the sensor to give us a 2x mode with the same camera. And that obviously without having the same level of quality will give us very decent results for a phone with this price tag. And that in a lot of cases are incredibly detailed. As you can see, the phone maintains this level of quality pretty well when we're taking photos in interiors and even at night. As you can see, results are incredibly surprising. Comparing photos using the main camera as opposed to photos using the selfie camera, the difference could not be bigger. We have a lot more detail, we have a lot better colors. Of course, this is partly because the selfie camera is kind of mediocre, but it is also because the main camera is very good. In fact, one of my favorite features on the cameras of the A15 is the portrait mode we get when we take pictures at night, because traditionally portrait photos were good with good lighting conditions when the images had a lot of detail and a lot of information, but when we took photos at night, it kind of got destroyed and the portrait mode was horrible and it didn't understand the subject and the background, and it basically made terrible photos. So being able to get decent results from a $150 phone in portrait mode at night is absolutely amazing. That being said though, video quality is kind of, well, not insanely good. As I said earlier, partially it's because it can only get up to 1080p 30 FPS, but it's also because the compression Samsung does to these videos is absolutely brutal. Back in the day, phones used to apply very harsh compression to their photos and videos because phones had very little storage, so they had to compress the videos as much as they could so they could fit in the phone. But nowadays, it is not necessary. Phones have a lot of storage. Phones can record video without that hard of a compression and retain a lot of the quality. I don't know why Samsung just does this. The only positive thing I can say about video using the main sensor on the A15 is that it can do slow motion recording. It gets up to 720p at 120 FPS, which is kind of the bare minimum slow-mo video. That's what we got on the iPhone 5S. What was it, 11 years ago? But this is a very basic phone and it could have definitely not gotten any sort of slow motion, but it got it. So yeah, it's definitely a positive thing. Then when it comes to the ultra-wide camera, in my opinion, it is the bare minimum. If we take photos at broad daylight, it's not going to give us horrible results, but as soon as you get indoors with lower lighting conditions, or even worse, you go take pictures at night, you can argue this camera is not worth using at all in those conditions because it gives you the option to get a different focal length, but at the expense of most of the quality. I mean, as I showed you earlier, the selfie camera compared to the main camera, it's just, there's no comparison. You should always use the main camera in those scenarios. So yeah, most of the time, I don't even recommend using it. And well, I can say the same thing about video using the ultra-wide camera. Colors look weird, it doesn't have any stabilization, and the video looks incredibly blurry because of the excessive compression. Earlier, I said that fine, you can use the ultra-wide camera with perfect lighting conditions outdoors, but that doesn't apply to video. You should never record video on this phone ever unless it's absolutely necessary that it's an ultra-wide video. And last but not least, we have to mention the macro 2 megapixel camera, which despite not being incredibly sharp, and not giving us super crazy results, it is a very nice add-on to the phone because it's one of the most interesting photography tools I've ever seen. It gives you incredible photos that you could never take with any other camera otherwise, and that's not always present in other phones. Even high-end phones like the Galaxy S24 don't have macro capabilities, so it's definitely good news to see it on the A15. And well, when it comes to the interface using the selfie camera, it is pretty much the same one we had with the other cameras. There's only a couple differences, mainly that we're not going to be able to take panoramic selfie photos, we're not going to be able to take selfie food photos, we're not going to be able to take selfie night photos. So there's a couple limitations using the selfie camera as opposed to every other camera, but in every other way, as you can see, it's pretty much the same settings, the same everything. As we did with the main camera, let's begin by talking about photos, the selfie photos, which have been surprisingly good. As I said earlier, it has 13 megapixels, and it also has a relatively large sensor for a selfie camera, which is going to give us even more sharpness. I have to say though, portrait mode results are a little bit worse than the ones with the main camera. It's not capable of reading and understanding edges as well as it does with the main camera. I guess it's because it's smaller, but the general quality is very good, and if you take your time doing the portrait mode photo with the selfie camera, it's going to be fine. It's just that if you take a faster photo, it's going to do a little bit of a worse job reading the edges. Video selfie is also very good, with the exception of focal length, which is very large for my taste. I think this is a camera that's supposed to be used for selfies, vlogs, or group photos. And in all of those situations, you want as much wide angle as you can get so everybody can fit in the photo, so you can show everything you want, and so you don't have to extend your arm as much so you don't get tired in the process. When it comes to the photos you can take indoors, I am also incredibly surprised because with this kind of lighting conditions, and especially with selfie cameras, is when we start seeing the quality kind of dip rapidly. But in this case, it only loses a little bit of sharpness and maintains a very good quality overall. Even with nighttime photos, with the help of the post-processing that this phone does to every photo it takes, we get some surprisingly decent results with very little lighting conditions. Maybe you cannot tell in the photos, but where I was, it was completely dark. There was barely any lighting. So the fact that the phone could get all that detail and all that sharpness is incredibly impressive. Definitely what's been most surprising to me is the video quality at nighttime, because I actually don't really know how the phone does it. With such a small sensor and such bad lighting conditions, the phone was able to take very decent video that's usable for YouTube or TikTok. Definitely one of the strong points on the A15. For most of you, I'm pretty sure this camera segment of the video has been more than enough. We've covered everything there is to know about it. But for those of you who want to see more photos, to have more references, I'm going to leave you with a couple minutes of photos using all of the cameras with 3 levels of zoom so you can really see how good or how bad the photos we can take with this phone are in different lighting conditions and in different situations. Now let's talk about the ecosystem you can get with a Galaxy A15, because nowadays it's not just about the device you buy, it's about the network of devices and how they interact with each other. You want your phone to communicate with your earbuds, with your smartwatch, with your laptop, with your tablet. As many of you know, Apple right now is probably the king when it comes to ecosystem. You have all kinds of devices that can seamlessly connect with one another. But Samsung is a very close second. If you buy a Galaxy A15, you'll be able to connect it to Samsung earbuds, a Samsung smartwatch, a Samsung laptop, a Samsung display. There's also Samsung tablets, so there's a lot of accessories, and on top of that, it's also an Android phone. So every Android accessory made for Android phones will also work seamlessly as part of the ecosystem of the Galaxy A15. The only thing that I don't like about the Samsung ecosystem is that Samsung doesn't make desktop PCs. So there's no alternative there. If you want a desktop PC, it won't be a Samsung desktop PC, so it's not going to be a part of the Samsung ecosystem. But for pretty much everything else, there is a Samsung alternative that's part of the Samsung ecosystem, and that's going to give you special features with your Galaxy A15. And well, that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If I left something unanswered, you have any questions, please tell me down below. What do you want to know? And if there's any other phones you want me to review like this in a long form review, also tell me in the comments.